we've been friends for 15 years.
Yeah.
So how far does this go back?
So if you're open to a little reframe, when you live in the story of loss, it's now not just that your mum passed, but now there's something missing from you. So then your experience is like, oh, the thing that hurt me the most is now being represented in the same dynamic, albeit through a different person. Oh, we just had an aha moment.
I think I bypassed that because
Peter Crone is a renowned mind architect who works with everyone from world-class athletes to stay-at-home parents to redesign the subconscious mind. We exist within limiting mental constructs that dictate our thoughts, feelings, actions, and the results we experience. Peter helps people and groups step outside of the world as they know it by identifying mental constructs that have been holding them back. His work explores the fundamental issues that affect us all to foster a deeper understanding of our common humanity. Peter is a writer, speaker, and thought leader in human awakening and potential. We hope you get all the wisdom and enjoy this episode as much as we did.
Hi guys, welcome to Easy A. We have a very special guest coming on. I'm here with
Allie Michelle.
And we have the wonderful, first time I'm meeting him, Peter Crone.
Wait, you have to say it in the British accent.
Peter Crone. Wait.
Peter with a T, please.
Peter Crone. Peter.
I like to give visual prompts to help.
Me too, help. Peter Crone.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's
Thank you for having me, ladies. So fun to be here.
Very excited.
Such a little gorgeous setting here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We try.
I moved all the chairs myself. Just kidding. I didn't. I tried. I really did try.
Did you?
Who, me? Yeah.
I just don't think that's true.
No, I knew that though. So.
Well, now he has a chair.
Yeah.
And we're going to pick his brain in said chair.
Uh-huh.
So having consumed a lot of your work recently, but also been personally affected by you at that event, It seems like the overarching theme of your work is freedom.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, when did you first realize that you weren't internally free? And then how did you figure out how to start removing those blocks?
Well, I mean, first of all, when you say you're personally affected by me, I can only hope that was in a good way.
No.
It's like I just don't want people to be misconstrued, like, the time you slapped me on stage or something like that.
I don't think you'd be sitting here if it was negative, so.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what you're into.
It was very positive. I feel like you just went in, kind of rearranged my perspective in like 10 seconds flat, and then just sent me on my way.
Did you tell me about this or no?
Yeah. The woman's nature to tolerate. We'll get into all this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that was cool. That was really cool.
That was cool.
She sent me a really long voice memo after that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
10 seconds. I was obviously off that day. But anyway, to go back to the original question of freedom, darling. So, I mean, unbeknownst to me, I wasn't free. Like most people, if you go up to Joe Blow on the street and say, hey, I'll help you find freedom, they'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm free. So it was a blind spot, and the catalyst was a breakup. So I was in a relationship, and love seems to be the means by which I've discovered that which I didn't know. And I had, my back history was my parents had passed when I was young. My mum when I was 7 from cancer, my dad when I was 17. And so I had a deep narrative around the fear of loss. And so when I first fell in love, as best as I knew what love was at the ripe age of 27 or whatever it was, I obviously did everything I could to avoid that person leaving me. And so I became the perfect boyfriend. It was like me plus. I was already kind and generous and thoughtful, but I was doing extra. And again, this was all sort of, I was oblivious to this. But then when she left, I fell apart, couldn't sleep, did all the things, lost weight, was talking to every friend under the sun, how do I get it back? And to cut to the end of the story, 6, 7, 8 weeks went by, and I had this incessant rumination of all these questions, like, where is she? Is she dating someone else? Will I see her again? Will I find love like that again? All these sort of somewhat desperate questions. And they were actually at times keeping me up at night because I was trying to figure out the answers, which is sort of the tendency of the brain. And in one foul swoop, I got the answer to all of them, which was just 3 words, which is, I don't know. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's dating anyone else. I don't know if I'll see her again. And I realized that was not only the truth, but it was actually reflective of the nature of life, which is life is uncertain. And for the first time, at least at the ripe old age of then 28, 29, I realized I'd never known, but because of the nature of the brain where we're designed to predict and protect, we all want to survive. We're always trying to figure everything out. And so at that point, I experienced the freedom, to your question, that cascaded through my body, every cell, in a way that I'd never experienced before, where I was like, I not only don't know what's going to happen, I'm totally okay with that. And so not only was it freedom, it was synonymous with peace, it was synonymous with complete calm. And yeah, so that started my plight into helping other people find freedom. Not necessarily through breakups, but might I recommend that? It's a good way.
Did you start to extend that to other like friends and stuff? At what point did you feel, I'm becoming some sort of like a mentor in this space?
I mean, it was relatively instantaneous. I'd already been teaching, but more like physically, like I was doing training stuff and Pilates and yoga. That was my background. So even at that time, I'd just finished traveling the world with a couple of actors for 5 years, taking care of their physiques, transforming their bodies for all their films. So I was already in that arena of transformation and self-improvement, just more with the density of our meat suits. And then I realized, wait a minute, that takes a while. It's fun, but I could very rapidly change someone's perspective, so the circumstances of their life could be the same, and yet they have an entirely different experience of themselves and life just by virtue of looking through different eyes, which was one of my favorite quotes by Proust. He said, the journey of true discovery lies not in finding new lands, but in looking through new eyes. So I basically became an eye surgeon-ish. Just without removing your eyes.
Did you feel like the mental shift helped the physicality shift as well, like quickly? Or what came first, essentially?
Instantaneous. That's the thing that I noticed. As I got further into my career helping people, it was really fascinating. The first thing that I always saw when I helped somebody look through a set of new eyes was their vital signs changed. So the ones that were obvious to me were respiratory rate. Like I could see someone's shoulders drop. They would take a deeper breath and often actually express that. They're like, wow, I don't think I've ever breathed that deeply before, which was really, for me, symbolic of the tension in their system that just got released because they were no longer in a position of fight or flight. And then if we could measure heart rate and blood pressure, all of those things would also stop or lower. And then oftentimes if people had some sort of issue, disease, sickness, even if it was chronic, it might take a minute, but I mean, I've had people with all sorts of things from the cancers to multiple sclerosis to endometriosis, and that they take a while, could be a couple of months, but they're like, wow, I just don't have it anymore. Wow. Which to me is an extension. It gets a little esoteric, but they're literally a different human being. So okay, good. Well, we're in the right room.
Perfect.
This is the esoteric chamber. So good. So yes, when they shift into a different essence and a different energetic signature, then their thoughts, feelings, actions all shift, and consequently they also have a different physiology. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So instead of trying to heal someone with whatever they have, whatever the dis-ease is that created the disease in their body at some point, by changing who they are, then they literally become a different person who the sort of commensurate expression of that in their body also has to shift, right? Yeah. Instead of staying the same and trying to heal your problem, you can't do that.
I've been doing yoga for we've both been doing yoga since we were 16, so over 10 years. But I feel like I didn't even understand yoga until I started to realize like, oh, this is actually about the breath. And so I wasn't getting, because I was similar to you, I started physical ballerina really intense 2 years old. Okay. And you feel like you're getting over all of these humps, or sometimes you can feel better than other people because you're pushing through that resistance. But then there was a neglect in the emotional or mental capacity. And so I felt very reliant on that physical force. If I stood still for even one day, I would feel my whole mental world just deconstruct. I'd be like, well, I guess I'm not that strong or resistant because, and then when I started to understand yoga from the perspective of breath and it actually reflecting in those tense experiences in life, can you breathe through it? Then I was like, oh, and that was literally 3 years ago. I was like, wait a minute, I had that realization in yoga. It's really fascinating.
No, it's beautiful, right? And I've often used the metaphor of yoga with some of my athletes, working with a lot of pro athletes who they're phenomenal at what they do. They get paid millions of dollars. It's often a sport they played since they were a kid. But they will say things like, well, yoga's really hard. I'm like, well, it's not. It's just you're stiff. Right? So yoga is always going to, like one of my quotes you may have heard, I say, life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. And so really I look at that energetically, psychologically, emotionally, but it's still apropos for physical, right? So yoga will reveal where you're not mobile. And I know because my downward dog looks more like a dome than a pyramid. So, I'm quite happy to recognize my own shortcomings. But so that it's a beautiful physical reflection of where we also lack freedom, right? In our flexibility in this case. But then you can think of flexibility of mind, right? Where do we get triggered so readily or easily by life or a partner or a parent is showing your inability to be flexible with somebody else's perspective. Yeah. So it's the two, they're sort of intertwined.
It reminds me a lot about the concept of balance. So like, because you were so body-centered when you started, how are you balancing that right now? Because it has a component, obviously. Like for me, I still need to move every single day. Now that you're so renowned, you have such probably, I would say, a pretty intense schedule going around and having all the conferences, whatever events. How are you balancing that within yourself?
I think to your question earlier, the shift mentally and emotionally has such a huge impact physically. It's not to say that I now negate taking care of my body. It's just that I'd assert that I'm in a relatively consistent state of calm. Yeah. That what most people will have to do, like as a offset to the state of stress that they're currently in, at least I've mitigated that. So for me, it's more about just optimization, right? Yeah. So I'm an athlete, I play tennis, I play golf, I work out, I do all the things, I take care of my vehicle, but there's the absence of any dis-ease now that may have been there prior to my revelations. So it's sort of, as a metaphor, if you imagine you've got a foot on a brake and a foot on the accelerator at the same time, I've just taken my foot off the brake. So I don't need as much quote unquote gas, right? So, but I still love it. I mean, it's an integral part of my day, right? Yeah. Usually in the morning, I get it out of the way. So whatever that might be, from Pilates, yoga, HIIT training, tennis, all the things.
I love that you're a Pilates guy. I love that because no one understands how hard Pilates is.
No.
It is incredible.
When I was traveling the world with the who's who of, Hollywood, and they loved all of these different modalities, and I was always sort of wanting to be the quintessential teacher. And so I was like, okay, it's great that I have bachelor's in human biology, exercise physiology, and I did all of my training with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And I was like, but I want to get all of these different modalities. So I became a Pilates instructor, became a yoga instructor. That's fun. Wherever I've gone now, like I have a Reformer and a Cadillac at my house, wherever I go. Yeah. Even have a wonder chair.
Wow.
Yeah, I got all the toys. Yeah. Yeah, I can even do, put the little ring between your hips and strengthen your adductors.
I hate that one.
What do you mean? I thought girls love that one. It's like
I can't walk after.
It's like the external version of Kegels, right?
That's why I can't walk after. When you're working with clients, because you've worked with so many different kinds of people, do you think the through line of a lack of freedom is like a need for certainty? Do you find no matter what the problem is, to go back to your original point?
To a certain degree, I would articulate it even more simply, which is just to survive, right? So certainty being an extension of the illusion of safety, right? Like I'll say, true security is the absence of the need for external security. But so if you really get that, it's like I'm at peace with myself. I trust life, whether you call it surrender or faith. So yes, it's not so much the looking for certainty, it's the who are they that's looking for certainty, right? The identity that thinks that certainty is where they'll find peace is actually the misnomer. Peace is in the absence of the identity that thinks it needs security. Mm-hmm. Just to keep it real simple for the folks. It's like, wait, what?
No, that took a second to land. That was more simple.
I'm listening.
Could you just say that again for the people in the back?
Yeah. No, you have such a good way of cutting through the fog. That's why I loved being on the panel with you, because people would talk for 5 minutes and you'd answer in 3 words, and it was just such a solid, sharp point. Yeah. So you have such a good way of cutting through. Is there a specific process you walk yourself or your clients through when there's a door of, okay, we're not free, we have to open this door and walk through?
It's always going to be bespoke to whoever and whatever they're saying, because sometimes people's stories, which is all it is, right? I'm just working in code. So meaning I'm listening to linguistics and language and sound and intonation, but I can hear the pretense, the lie. That's what I'm always looking for, is what somebody says in the way that for them it's a truth and a reality, but what I hear is it's a means of protection. And it's actually just sustaining the identity that they become misidentified with. So that's why it's very rapid for me, because I'm looking at them as a timeless, boundless being, and they're trying to tell me a human story. So sometimes the story can be really traumatic and heartfelt, and that warrants a little bit more love and compassion, more the maternal form of love, which is all accepting and embracing. Sometimes it's just complete BS, and I can tell that they've got, fair amount of fortitude, and so I can be more direct, which is more the masculine form of love. Like, that's bullshit. Let's cut through that. So that's the art, I think, is to know where someone's at, to meet them in the correct energy so that they don't go into automatic defense. Because most egos are just trying to protect themselves all the time. So that's why I said, if I go up to a stranger on the street, I could see energetically their patterns. And if I say something, they don't know who the fuck I am. And so they're just going to go straight into retaliation or reaction. And so I have to feel how open is someone to contribution. So it's really distinguishing between, in simple terms, the soul and the ego, right? Most people are speaking from the ego. I'm referring them to the soul.
I've noticed that within our wellness community too. It's like depending on, because we mentor girls every Sunday. We do like a workshop depending on what we're actually going through. Like last week we did nonviolent communication.
We got in an argument and I sent her the workshop and it was just nonviolent communication. She's like, you're such an asshole.
Because I create the workshop like, from an aesthetic perspective, she creates the writing and then
So she's like putting designs on it. She's like, hold on.
Wait a minute.
That's perfect.
Yeah, but it's true because recently what we've come to the conclusion of is our business relationship is new, I think, because we've been friends since we were 12. And so right now we're actually building a new relationship right now because how we speak to each other in that energy is completely different. So we're almost like understanding each other again from this perspective. Yeah. And that was fun because then we came to the realization that, we came at each other already having a conclusion on either end. And then we became like lawyers, like defenders, instead of looking at the problem together. So even that in itself, like knowing where we were, trying to use, I don't know if I'm sure people, like what we were saying in the live call about how sometimes when you try to use new energy, it feels foreign and false to people. And their defense mechanism comes up because you're like, who is this person?
Exactly.
You're sending me a heart. I need a couple days to think about this heart. And you're just like, who's my friend who's going to, go up against me? And so I think that's what we've been practicing with each other is letting it feel foreign in a way so that then it can become normal again, if that makes sense.
That does.
But it feels new.
Yeah.
In a way, the communication.
And it should. I mean, in the keynote that I was giving yesterday, it's a very advanced perspective or distinction, but I was helping the group understand the fragility of life, right? Like the preciousness that it is to be human that we often take so for granted. And I know, obviously, at 17, my dad goes to work, never comes back because he's in a fatal shipping accident. So I got this visceral experience of, how quickly things can change and sort of encouraging people to really love the people they love, right? Like it's so cliche. But what you're pointing to, and I was teaching the group, I said, if you could really understand that every time you're meeting someone, it's the first time you're meeting them, it gives people the opportunity to evolve, right? Because otherwise it's like if you have this assumption of who somebody is and then they act or behave differently to that, you're like, well, Dave's being weird. Well, no, Dave's just doing what he's doing. It's only weird relative to the image that you're holding on to of Dave, right? And that's where we can so readily pigeonhole people, sort of nail their foot to the floor and not give them an opportunity to expand into a different type of person. So it's a powerful distinction. I will say it's an easy one to actually implement. And of course, you still have to remember people's names because otherwise that becomes weird. It's like, oh, nice to meet you. It's like, well, I'm your wife.
Unless you just change your name.
But you could be new.
People do that in LA.
I don't know. You're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of like naming, and what I love about you is in one of the podcasts I recently listened, you were talking about how this idea of credentials, it's like you kind of keep going back.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets to someone who just made it
Do you
up.
like that? Yeah.
I loved that because, I mean, even starting the wellness community and losing my mom so young, I feel like it gave me the gnosis. Get that from you.
You're welcome.
And I just knew that I was meant to give this wisdom to other people. I didn't know how it was manifesting or whatever.
Yeah.
How did you build that confidence? Because I think the world's shifting right now from this idea of like credentials and going to college and like asking for myself personally. It's like, how did you build that confidence? And then how do you speak to people in that way who are like, you don't have these credentials or you didn't do this or do that. So what makes me want to trust you in this field?
Sure. I mean, I think to the first part of the question, confidence is just, it's an accumulation over time of evidence, right? Like to see that I could work with some of the world's greatest performers, girls who are being paid millions of dollars to perform in a sport that they've played for 2-3 decades. And you could argue that, they're not immune to help, but if there's real transformation in the way that they perform, then that's credibility, right? So, and then looking at somebody who may have a sickness, a disease, to see that dissipate and dissolve, there's evidence time and time again, and even more benignly, if somebody's just unhappy or they feel depressed or they have social anxiety, and then within one conversation, they don't have that anymore, something's happening, right? So that's the first part of the question. And it's a deeper gnosis, right? To the word that you stole, which is totally fine.
Trust me, the amount of words I wrote down, I was like, I'm going to have to Google that word and that word and that word.
See, everyone's learning. It's beautiful. No, it's a deeper knowing, right? It's a guttural knowing, and that's why I use that word. But so there's just within myself, that's the confidence of my own knowing of what I see. And then to the second part of your question, how do I speak to people who may have doubt or, the sort of trepidation about what I'm saying and might not trust me? To use your words, I don't necessarily speak to them, I just listen. And so if that's where they're at, I'm like, okay. Right, there's nothing, I have nothing to prove. So if somebody doesn't believe me, I'm like, okay, well, that's where you're at, and I honor that. So it sort of gives me the freedom to just contribute wherever contribution is sought or where people have questions. And if you understand the actual dynamics of language itself, like right now, as I'm speaking, I'm sharing a perspective, I'm making a statement. There's really nothing for you to say. But then if I were to say, well, what do you think about that? Now I've engaged through a question. So if somebody says, well, Peter Crone, you're full of shit and I don't really believe this, and where you don't have certificates. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, thank you. Do you want to go get a coffee or something? Or, do you know, like I just understand that they're saying something.
Yeah.
And if it was in Mandarin, I wouldn't even understand it. So like, why would I be upset by that? But you start to see how easily affected people are by the words of others, right? Which seems, contradictory to what I was taught as a kid, which is sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. So, but people are super hurt by words, apparently. What's the meme? It's like offended by everything and ashamed of nothing, currently. That seems to be the world we live in. It's like...
No, it's hard, though, especially when you're in a new space. Like me and my friend Jordan, we're learning how to surf right now, and that's a completely different world. And people are yelling at us left and right. And it's like, I just have to be okay with this at one point and just be neutral to it all. But it is scary feeling new and then at the same time being attacked, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and even the word attacked, right? Like it's got this sort of undercurrent of like violence and fear and self-protection, and and that's how it could feel, right? But that's your experience, which would really reveal more something about you than what like somebody's saying something, unless you're out there surfing and people are throwing like sledgehammers at you. I don't know, but otherwise it's words, right?
Yeah.
So what it would reveal in the way that I listen to that statement is more that you're fearful, you're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. Which is more about your energetic signature. So you could equally be in a different setting and somebody might be saying something else. You go to a new school and you can't sit at a table because you're not with the cool kids. It's again, you could say, well, I'm being attacked or I'm being rejected, or no, you're just in that same energetic signature of your fear that you're doing something wrong. So really the actual attack is you to you, not them to you. Do you see that? Subtle,
and
right?
They're just proving me right.
Yeah. Your identity that would create guilt and shame, or the feeling of imposition, or that could also lead people to quitting things, right? It's like, oh, it's too uncomfortable, people are horrible. No, they're just saying something. What they're revealing is your own feeling of inadequacy or insecurity, which is the gift. So if you can continue to do that, obviously by reading the room and being respectful and honoring people's space, and if, especially in the surf world, I know it gets very heated out there, but they're not attacking you. Maybe you don't know the rules and regulations, or, because you're in the way of them getting whatever it is in their world, their story, their narrative, that you equally are the fault for their discomfort is equally a lie, right? Mm-hmm. So they're using victimhood or blame and accusation towards you, which is disempowering to them as well, right? So you just see it's replete. It's the world, right? It's everybody else's fault. No one wants to be responsible.
I was saying like surfing in Malibu is kind of similar to driving, except you can hear them. Right. When they're in the car, they're just like, oh, and you're like, hi, I can't hear you. It can't affect me, but on the wave, it's like they're right there.
Nice to meet you.
Yelling in your ear. It's thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Do you think we ever, because it seems like most of the time we're just kind of two interpretations of the moment that are very different.
Yeah.
And that never actually meet. Do you think we ever actually meet each other in an honest way?
We do. I mean, that to me is love. That's love, right? That's the most beautiful experience. And what I would assert every human being is looking for, whether it be romantic or otherwise, is to have true presence with another being. In the absence of the identity, sort of I said with this group yesterday, I said, no you, no problem, right? So the obstacle we're always up against is the idea of ourselves, which is founded in limitations. And in the absence of that, there's just pure presence, there's pure beingness. And if you can find that with somebody else, there's no greater moment. That's true affinity, that's true connection. The irony is the way that we try to get it or garner it is by using these mechanisms and forms of manipulation that the ego is trying to compensate for, right? So if I can look better, prettier, stronger, faster, richer, and then I'll get the love and acceptance I so desperately crave. But in the absence of all of that, you just be, which is why kids and animals is just so adorable, and that we find such connection with them both, right? Because they have the absence of something which is a part of us that's trying to get love. They're not, they're just love. They're just there. So it can happen, but it's rare.
Yeah, it is rare-ish. I was trying to think back to a moment. I'm like, what was the last time?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that angel probably.
Yeah, probably.
Of your dog.
When Peter met Angel.
And I think, I think it's more present between women, honestly, because I think women tend to be much more in the absence of fear, which tends to, again, unfortunately be ubiquitous in this planet, right, for a woman. Like, I think in the absence of the potential predators out there, sadly, mostly the patriarchy and the men, a woman with a woman, I think you can have those moments, and you can probably speak to this as, you're so close. You can have those moments of intimacy, right, which is often misconstrued as like physicality or sexuality. To me, intimacy is an energetic exchange of pure presence where you're really with each other. And I think women do a much better job of that than men, right? Because men, there's sort of the bravado and the masculinity that has to be, pumped up in a way. It's sort of, it gets in the way of just the fragility and the sensitivity of a being that just wants to be with another being. Like I always talk about these three words: we all want to be seen, heard, and held. And as long as there's an ego or an identity in the way, it's very difficult for that to both be exchanged, felt, or, transmitted to somebody. But I think women do that really well, much better than guys.
Yeah, we have no choice.
No, but it's true. I'm friends with this brother and sister, and I was laughing because I've known him way longer than her, and she got in my car for the first time. She's like, so what was your childhood like? And that's just such a woman thing of we love each other like animals. It's just unguarded. But you also seem to have a really good balance when you talk of this masculine clarity that cuts through the fog.
Yeah.
But there's also so much heart in what you're saying, which I think is why it lands, because it's not just the sharp sword. There's also a feather bed underneath it.
Yeah.
So what are some things that have softened you as a man?
Well, firstly, thank you for saying that. I'm glad that comes across because it's both intentional, but I'd like to think inherent, right? That's my nature. I think it's every man's nature, every being's nature. I think in the absence of my need to try and prove anything or look cool or be the quintessential figure of a man who has to apparently be strong and all of that. In the absence of that, then I'm left with my more natural tendency to just be love. Meanwhile, not losing the faculties of specific observation, the power of language, being able to see things that other people can't see. So the marriage of the two, I think I also was very blessed to be raised by parents that were very loving, even in their absence. My mom I only had for 7 years. I don't really recall too much about our exchange. I was obviously very young and she was sick for 2 or 3 years. So she was probably kind of absent from about the age of 5. But my dad, for sure, in that decade we had together, just the two of us, he was just a very loving man. And so I often use this phrase of there's a language we use and there's a language that uses us. So obviously we're using English, but the language that uses us is invariably the environment with which we were brought up. So if it's mercurial, it's violent. If there's an absence of love, if kids are to be seen and not heard, there's dismissive energy, derogatory criticism. That's the language that will start to use that person as a means of self-protection. So I think for me, I was lucky that I had a very doting, loving father. So that also set the precedent and a foundation for me to function from. But I also feel like in the death of myself at 28, 29, I just got exposed in a way that wasn't vulnerability, but really being at peace with myself, regardless of what people thought, which makes me much more sensitive, which comes across as, compassion, love, empathy, all of those qualities. Because I'm not busy trying to either, garner something from someone, which is manipulation, or protect myself from somebody, which is, fear. So I think in the absence of all of that, there's just love and presence.
God, really, death does that to you.
Huh?
Love and presence.
Yeah.
Just get that from death.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fragility, because I lost my mom at 17. So
Yeah.
similar kind of like,
Okay.
that was the loving character. That was
Yeah.
like, this is love. Bye.
Yeah. Right.
So it was just like, whoa, the fragility slaps
Yeah.
you in the face, especially at that age.
Yeah.
And almost you have no choice but to surrender.
Yeah.
There's nothing else left.
Yeah.
Except I had her. So
Yeah.
that was good. Yeah.
But it sounds as though she sort of imparted and taught you what it was to be loved, right? So you at least had that as a role model, as an archetype to understand, which then I'm sure informed the way that you behaved, the kind of people you attracted. Because otherwise, like there's this video called Step Inside the Circle. I work with this group called the Passion Prison Project, where they go into incarceration facilities to help inmates, and this woman, Fritzy, it's incredible. And I watched this video, it's on Vimeo, YouTube, just Step Inside the Circle. She takes all of the guys in the yard, they're all in a big circle, and she asks a series of questions, like starting with relatively benign but difficult situations, like, were you raised by one parent? And if the answer is yes to any of the questions, you take a step inside the circle. Then, was one of your parents alcoholic? Were you ever hit? Were you ever abused? And you eventually just see that pretty much every question, they're stepping inside the circle. And I was in tears watching it the very first time, because I realized that people are in prisons, they didn't stand a chance. They don't know what love is, right? They only know what survival is. They only know what abuse is. That's the language that uses them. It doesn't condone their behavior, because obviously there's some sort of education process that has to happen. But it does breed an immense amount of compassion to realize, holy shit, like they just don't know how to express, experience, or receive love. And so that's where, again, I feel very fortunate, even in the absence of my parents and their passing, that at least I was given the legacy of what it is to be loved and be loving, and then do the best I can to bring that to others.
I know you say that, utopia isn't essentially the goal, but when it comes to the contrast and the neutrality and understanding that we need to understand our unlimitedness through the limitation of this reality, like what would be, in your eyes, I guess, the ideal goal here, in the sense of obviously we've been in a dark time for as long as we've been born. So, but like, what is the higher understanding of contrast when it's not like this dark? Because like, obviously we're gonna have contrast, right? Because it's just this dimension, but it's really contrasted right now.
Seems to be getting quite exacerbated and amplified for sure. I think, again, without sounding poetic or esoteric, or you've given me license to be as
I'm an
esoteric as I
esoteric
want.
poet. Come on. What do you mean?
Sorry, did I just step on your
And
toes?
we love it when you quote yourself. So just
Yeah, please keep going.
I say, we're here to transcend the constraints with which we arrived, right? That is the opportunity that it is to be human. Like our dogs, you've got beautiful Angel. I have my guy Krishna, he passed, but they're not sitting there vacillating, about, well, why did that happen? Why did he not give me the treat? And, there's not this inside rumination as to, is there something wrong with me? Did I do something bad? And so that to me is the gift that it is to be human, is not only to have all of these beautiful experiences, to meet people, to fall in love, to travel and, eat whatever it is that you want to eat, but to really recognize our true nature. And so we do need the resistance of the misidentification of our limited self based in insecurity, inadequacy, and scarcity, to have that contrast of like, oh, I am not that. Right? In Buddhist traditions, they talk about neti, which is the way to enlightenment, is to keep removing what you're not this, not that, not this, not that. So we really get down to, we can only really say I am. We know that we exist. We know that we're sitting here. Anything that's after the I am statement isn't necessarily a truth. It can be helpful, like, so if someone calls your name on the street, I am Ali, I am Peter, like you look around, but it's not a truth, right? Like you existed before any of the labels were actually superimposed, right? Certainly when it comes to nationalities and religions that people will kill each other over, you start to see how asinine it is. Like, okay, because I believe in a particular God and you believe in another God, that gives us just cause to maybe hate each other, God forbid, actually harm each other. But it's just based in language, right? So to get beyond all of that, I feel is the game. It's sort of what I call cosmic hide and seek, right? We have the straitjacket of our existence, the confines of our own linguistics, and the opportunity is to break free. It's like, holy shit, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not safe. I'm not loved. What I call a double negation, right? So we're in conflict with ourselves, with I'm not something, right? So if you really want to break it down to we are everything, We are all of it. But then in language, we're not something because of what we think happened. Like my brother was the better athlete or my sister was a greater academic. So that means I'm not good enough or I'm not wanted. So now I am everything, but I'm pretending I'm not something. That hurts because I'm in denial of myself. And so my work is what I call double negation. It's not like you have friends that say, no, you're amazing, you're great. Like, which, okay, that can placate them for a while and it's transitory relief. But it doesn't actually do anything because if they're still holding on to the not statement, they're still in their own state of suffering. So what I do is help them investigate the validity of that. Is it true that you're not good enough? Well, I got B's and my brother's got A. Yeah. So that means your brother got A's and you got B's. But does that mean you're not good enough? Or did you ascribe that to yourself, right? And so when you see that, it's like, holy shit, like freedom is on the other side of my story about myself. So that's the opportunity that is to be human, break free.
It's the shoulder shrug. Yeah. He's like, I know that was good.
I don't know. How's that?
No,
Is
that was fantastic.
So many nuggets.
Yeah.
Does that work? I don't know.
No, that works. Don't ask. But something I really appreciate, and I find this is a through line with people who I really respect and whose words hold a lot of gravity, is there is an embracing of their humanity and imperfections. And so I am everything, but I am not this. I think about like fantasy stories or the hero's journey where we all have like the fool, the villain, the hero within us. So when you feel a less socially acceptable aspect come up, how do you embrace that part of you? Like not deny it or shove it in the background, but not necessarily live your life from that place?
Great question. So I think because I've done this so often, I actually find joy in that. Like if there's any kind of trigger or I get upset by something, which tends to be for all of us, like in a more significant situation, right? An intimate relationship, like a romance or a parent or family where we've given the other human being a certain degree of power over our state, right? It's like, well, they upset me or they hurt me. So for me, I actually find joy and excitement in the opportunity to discover another constraint because I know what's on the other side, right? So again, very poetic, but I say our fears are the beacons that light the path to freedom. So, right. So if you recognize that, like to me, it's like, okay, wherever there's a constraint, it's actually the opportunity for me to discover a greater aspect of myself. Whereas most people will do everything they can to obviously mitigate or avoid that, escape, right? With whatever myriad of means we have nowadays, from food to weed to prescription drugs, street drugs, whatever it is, right? Sex, TV. So, which is fine, and there's no judgment, but actually you're only prolonging the actual intentionality of your incarnation, right? Which is to break free. But if you keep avoiding that, then you're going to have to revisit that at some point. So for me, I tend to use compassion. I be patient. If need be, if it's appropriate, I'll talk to a friend who I think has a good capacity to listen. But usually it's pretty self-evident at this point because I delineated these 10 prisons that we all have. And so I can usually reverse engineer whatever I'm experiencing into whichever of the prisons is being triggered. And then I can, as I said earlier, investigate the validity of it. Like, is it true that I'm a loser or I'm not wanted or I'm not safe? And it's not. It's just not true. And so when in the absence of the pretense of something, then there's the relief, the relaxation, and again, the freedom. So that's my process. And sometimes I'm still human. Sometimes they're stickier than others. And so I do occasionally reach out to somebody who can listen more discerningly, or if you're really caught in it. But it's become, I don't know how to use the terrible analogy, but it's like having a big kitchen island, that's just covered in a bunch of shit because you had a huge party. And, that is how most people live their life. It's hard to discern what's beneath everything. I think I've done a pretty good job of cleaning up my kitchen island. I'm just making this shit up as I go. But
it's working.
Maybe because I'm Virgo. Yeah. And it's like, okay, someone just spilled a bit of coffee. It's like, it's relatively easy to see that it's not part of the integrity of the island, right? So for me, it sort of tends not to be too dramatic these days. It's like, it's a blip and it's okay. And it allows me to still relate to others, have compassion for people and not sort of be too full of myself. But
okay.
Yeah.
Asking personally, like how much do you dig into the storyline string that goes all the way back to, let's say, whatever? Mm-hmm. Or do you just, because for me right now, it's like, I don't have to know, and I could be completely wrong about this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't have to know every detail about this trauma or pattern or story to let it go.
Right.
Or should I, like, how much should you dig into it before you're kind of like an expert of your own neurosis in a sense?
Yeah. Great question. I think it depends on the severity of the pattern,
Mhm.
right? So the degree to which it's been an ongoing perpetual experience that somebody's had, like it's a chronic conversation that they have. I think it's helpful to be able to correlate it to events of our life. People talk about past life regressions and, oh, do you believe in all of that? And I'm like, yes and no. It doesn't really matter whether something happened 5 days ago you're upset about or it's 5 lifetimes ago. The fact that it's still occupying your consciousness
Yeah.
is something to look at, right? So some people just don't remember. I mean, when you're a child, the mechanisms we use for coping oftentimes are denial or like to suppress in a way that we don't have any recollection because it was too hard for a child to actually go through, in which case you're not going to know the events, but you can tap into the experience. And how does that correlate to today's life? Like, where does that actually manifest? So I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to try and remember when they don't or can't. And I don't think it's necessary. I do think it's helpful. It's like being in a courtroom, right? Like if you have the evidence, then you can just corroborate, the feeling with the experience as a child, which will then obviously help. Oh shit, like when I was 5 was the first time I really thought I'd done something wrong. And now, I just got fired, divorced, and I'm in the same feeling of shame and guilt. But it's really that kid who was like under the impression I did something bad,
Gotcha.
So it can help, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, it's not necessary. And then sometimes I think people will keep in the story and then use that to then, it's now the excuse as opposed to
Yes.
the antidote or the diagnosis or to move on.
Yeah.
And so, that's just something, because even with our miscommunication,
No, let's just tell him. Why not?
Nonviolent communication?
Well, no, we have this old pattern of like, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Go for it.
When we communicate, my tendency, anytime I have conflict with someone, is to just kind of, I'm very composed. And
Okay.
so I can be like aloof until I can clean my side of the street. And then I want to like arrive with a neutral thing instead of being in it.
Yeah.
And I think
No, go on. You know me.
have you seen The Incredibles?
Is that like a cartoon animated?
It is a cartoon.
A
You
long
haven't
time
seen it?
ago. Like there's the dad,
it's
like
the
Do you remember
family.
the baby that like explodes in flames when it's upset?
that's
Wow.
So basically, I disappear.
Thank you
And
Yeah.
for that.
yeah, yeah,
that's
Well,
quite
yeah,
the
and so
skill.
then
Can you do that on
I guess
demand?
what
she can.
I yes. But
It might happen right now.
Yeah.
so I think what happens, and I've evolved a lot to the point where now I have to actually withdraw, but then I will
Yeah.
subconsciously sometimes use that as the other side of the fire as punishment of like, well, I'm going to separate. She separates intentionally. I separate as like punishment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can tell who's the more faulty.
No, it's not. I don't think it's more involved. I think it's just my coping
It's just
mechanism
different.
is if I feel like my nervous system gets jarred, I'll disappear.
Yeah.
Houdini. I don't think that's evolved. I think that's just different.
Yeah, no, it's just different. I forgot, where were we going with this? Why were we telling him this?
We'll be right
Because
back,
the
folks.
story-
If you could just hold for the next.
It was about the story because we've been trying to solve this
Okay,
for years.
So,
Yes.
so I think
Yes.
for me is just understanding, like how much to actually go back or to actually work on it in the present moment and figure it out
Yeah.
from there, as opposed to like, we've been friends for 15 years.
Yeah.
So how far does this go back? And it gets a little confusing,
Well,
in a sense.
I know my side of things has actually nothing to do with you. It goes all the way back to my childhood and like
Yeah,
so
same.
that's
But then a lot of my childhood,
But you don't
because
really
I lost my
remember.
mom at 17, it's just gone. Like I
Yeah.
don't remember it. I want to, and I think there will be a point where maybe it comes up in different ways, maybe different types of therapy, EMDR, I don't know. But so far I've been having this like black space of
Yeah.
memory. And so it gets a little frustrating because she can really pull it really easily from her childhood. She also
Yeah.
has an amazing memory.
Yeah.
Whereas I think I kind of black out. So for me, it's been like, should I work really hard to try and get down to the depth of that story,
Yeah.
or does it even matter in the healing of it?
Both and, right? So if you're open to a little reframe.
Fun, yeah. Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go.
So
I
you
knew
said
this
it
was
3
gonna
times
happen.
in the course of the conversation.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Which is that you lost your mum, right? So why is that a lie?
Because I guess energetically she's still
That
here.
would be the poetic way of looking
Yeah,
at it. There's
yeah.
a certain degree of validity to that,
Yeah.
that we could believe that all spirits are still present in this plane. But in language and really looking at it more like practically, why is it a lie?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's a good answer. So I want you to consider the reframe would be you didn't lose your mum died.
Okay.
Because see, what happens is in the loss, which would contribute a little bit to your party trick of bursting into flames, right?
I'm so sorry.
Hey, this is impressive. I mean, you can go on America's Got Talent. I mean, I don't know. You'd only probably get one audition, right? Because then now what else? Well, I could do a bigger flame.
I'm Aelin Galathinius.
Yes.
You won't get that reference. That's fine.
Which one?
I'm Aelin Galathinius.
It's a fantasy character.
It's a fantasy
Okay,
character.
no, so
Anyway,
I'm so
just
out
keep
of touch
talking.
with
Death
shit
and
like
loss.
that.
So sorry.
Okay, that's fine. But anyway, when you live in the story of loss, then it's now not just that your mum passed, but now there's something missing from you. So this works, in Hollywood when Mr. Cruz says something like, "You complete me," it appeals to the fact that in of ourselves, we're not complete, right? Which is a lie. And this is why romance and relationships invariably don't work, because if someone completes me, well, and then I fall in love with them and the love is exogenous, it's out there. Well, if that person goes, well, now I've lost something. Versus understanding the truth of what's happening, someone could be the catalyst to reveal the love that I am, for which reason I love spending time with them. But I get to garner the experience of euphoria from myself, courtesy of them, not as them. Right. So do you see the difference? So whatever your mum represented, which is huge, and I can obviously, we could speak to that another time or in this conversation, that she represented so much for you and the connection you had and the love and the adoration and the inspiration she provided, right? So when she dies, there is, of course, a natural grieving process, which is part of the human experience, which is to be honored and is beautiful. But she died when you were 17. I don't know how old you are, but it's a decade or so ago, right? So now that event happened, but then for a decade, you've been living in the pain of the story, not the event.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that would contribute to why, and it's appropriate to this conversation and question, your reactions might be a little bit more visceral and inflamed, because it's almost like the threshold that you have is much smaller because you're already in a state of potential threat, right? Someone you love, right? I'm making the assertion, obviously, you guys are so close. So anytime what she does is more withdrawal, right? So then your experience is like, oh shit. The thing that hurt me the most, which is the passing of your mom, is now being represented in the same dynamic, albeit through a different person. Oh, we just had an aha moment. Yeah.
That was that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I bypassed that because similar to you, I have so much gratitude for her passing in a weird way, because it gave me this path and like this legacy to follow. And I feel more connected to her than I ever have. Like I don't necessarily grieve her in a traditional way, but that makes so much sense from that perspective.
Good. Well, I'm happy I could help. So just to finish that off and put it in a ribbon for you to be able to actually integrate is if you can recognize the dynamic of what's actually transpiring for anybody who gets in a fight, all it is the threat of the loss of love.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. I was like,
right?
Yeah.
So the chicken and the egg is it's irrelevant. So either your energy becomes a little bit too amplified for her. So looking at Ali's triggers, there might be the threat of, judgment, criticism, or perceived danger. What?
It's a fear of annihilation. Not to think you're actually going to annihilate me, but it's like a deep subconscious.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is, right? Because it is, ironically, what we want to do and what I do, before being the mind architect, affectionately, I was a hitman for the ego, right? Which sounds really violent, but, so it really is the annihilation of self. Ironically, the very thing that we want is on the other side of the death of ourselves, which is the last thing the ego wants, right? That is the beautiful conflict that we're all here to resolve. So the part of you that feels the pending annihilation withdraws as a means of self-protection, which is smart. It's a coping strategy. So whatever happens that triggers that as the feeling of a perceived threat, then you're in this vicious cycle, right? Because then she experiences the withdrawal, which is reflecting and mimicking the deepest pain for her, which is like, fuck no, right? And so the flames of self-preservation come to the surface. But what's happening that's so beautiful is you're both just experiencing the perception. It's a perception of the withdrawal of love that could never go anywhere because you are the essence of love itself. You've just collapsed it with each other. And that's where you find the vulnerability that your ego then is doing everything it can to survive the pain that it's already transpired. It's happened a long time ago. You're just collapsing it with each other. So if you can really realize that on the human level, you both adore each other, you both love each other, that's never going to go anywhere. And then beneath it, even more profoundly, the love that you're so desperately trying to hold on to is you. It can't go anywhere. Then it just opens up so much more compassion, and you can listen without withdrawing. You can listen without blowing up and go, okay, there's a misunderstanding here. It's really the opportunity that you're giving each other to understand that you are the love that you're misidentifying within each other.
Wow.
Hey, you're pretty good at this.
Yeah. Has anyone ever told you to do this for a living?
Yeah,
Well,
probably
thank
should.
you very much. I might keep it up. So that's why it's so beautiful, and that's why I wanted to point out, and thank you, by the way, for the compliment, is that the story of loss sustains the reaction of the fear of losing it again. But if you never lost it, then you don't have to have that visceral reaction to the perception of it going again, because it never left you. Your mum was the catalyst in the mirror to reveal the love you are. So ironically, in her withdrawal, instead of blowing up, which is the perception that something's being pulled away from you, you actually get to step into your love and hold space for her, which actually opens her up so she doesn't withdraw.
Wow. I don't think we need to do mushrooms next Saturday.
It was Blue who said, actually, Blue, our friend Charlotte, she said, you're actually just human ayahuasca.
Yeah,
You are.
literally.
Yeah,
Literally.
You just don't have to throw up. Or sometimes, depends.
Oh, God.
Depends how disgusting no.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, without being too, it's fun to have fun, but this is obviously a real thing for you. And I just want to really honor that. So does that resonate? Can you feel that?
Deeply.
Yeah.
Deeply. It explains a lot.
Awesome.
I love how the one thing I was pointing to was the one thing that I was like, it's before that big event. It's before that for sure.
Yeah,
and you're like, let's talk about that.
That's
And I was like, no, I'm good on that. I feel great. Love her. Talk to her all the time. And you're like, wait.
just maybe not quite so much.
Yeah, I think that's
but it's so simple,
insane.
right?
Yeah.
And so profound, because it really defines the world. If you live in the world where you've lost something, then ipso facto, you can't not be in the world of lack. And so when you're already in lack, as I saying, the threshold of your ability to tolerate the absence of love is already so fragile, right? If mum was alive, then her withdrawal wouldn't have the same impact. But now that mum isn't, and she embodied that sort of symbology of true love for you, and now that's gone, well, shit, whatever I have left in the realm of love, I've really got to fucking hold on to. So as soon as it goes, I'm already at that threshold of blowing up. But now it's like, oh no, mum was amazing. She symbolized so much of the love that I also embody. And I'm so grateful for that. Like I said at the beginning, my dad really, the words that define me were courtesy of the energy that he sort of, through his own expression of his love for me, helped me to imbibe that through osmosis as well. So I didn't lose my dad. My dad died. And do I miss him? Sure. That's different. And did I grieve him? Of course. And do I sometimes still speak to him like you do with your mum? Of course. But the love didn't go anywhere. Right? So he was the reflection and perhaps the catalyst, just like your mum was for you. So then it's like, holy shit, I never lost anything. My mum died. I miss her. But the thing that's getting triggered here is still fully intact, because that's your nature.
Wow. Holy shit.
Holy shit balls.
Holy shit. Oh, yeah.
The mind
I love
architect,
epiphanies.
everyone.
I love
Yeah.
epiphanies. They're so
That was a light bulb.
exciting.
That was a big light bulb.
That was a huge light bulb.
You just
for
saved us a lot of future issues.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, we'll send an invoice.
Yeah, very good. It's going to
I
be a
was
big
like, I don't
invoice,
know
I
how
feel.
personal I want to get on here, but I do want to utilize this.
That's
Yeah.
great.
But again, I don't want to belabor the point, but as part of the integration of it, it's good to have the repetition, and obviously you'll speak about it, but it's really, I hope people listening to this have their own version, right? And that's the gift that you're offering in terms of this platform and a podcast, so that hopefully people can, through you vicariously, see their own versions. Like, obviously there's going to be hopefully millions of people hear this who've got their own version of a lost story. It could be a job, it might be a loved one, it could be a spouse, it could be a parent. And when you actually transcend that and see, no, it's not a loss, it's the passing of something. Form comes and goes, but we don't lose anything, right? So even sitting here for the hour plus, our bodies are literally different, because cells are dying, which is the good news. New cells are being born. So if you understand the dynamic nature of life, everything's in constant transition, but the essence of what we're always looking for is who we are, right? I say the seeker is the sought, right? We are what we're looking for. But if we superimpose that onto others, then if others go, then we feel loss. Now we're in the lie, and that's suffering. So
Whoa.
it's pretty simple, really.
So simple. You know. How did I not know this before?
Don't know what your fucking problem is, but anyway.
Now you see why I sent you a voice note after the dinner.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Which I also do want to speak on that before you leave us, is the woman's
But you
nature
won't
of
lose
tolerance.
me.
Yeah, you will not lose him.
Oh my God.
You'll never lose me, darling. I'll always be there.
Never let go, Jack.
Is that Titanic? Or
Yeah.
not? Oh, okay.
I just said it without Jordan's nodding. It's Titanic.
Okay. I don't know. I'm so crap at that. But anyway, yes.
Yes.
It's Peter, by the way, but that's fine.
Pizza Crone.
Because all the names are irrelevant, as we said earlier. I like
Right.
Jack.
Yeah. Jack's nice.
Yeah. Carry on. What was your question?
The woman's nature of tolerance. That's what really
Yes.
stuck with me that you helped me
yes.
understand. Can you expand on that for the class?
Yes. People in the back who are still scratching their heads. Wait, what just happened? So one of the things that I think is one of the most beautiful attributes of a woman and the feminine is the capacity for resilience, right? Like women are by far stronger in every sense of the word than a man, not just in physical, like, I mean, the capacity to the germination of another human being, the genesis of another existence that comes through you women, and then the birth and the raising of, and all of that just speaks to a woman's resilience. But I couple that when you understand that the dynamic of the ego, which is based in insecurity, inadequacy, and scarcity, that the innate biological capacity for a woman to be resilient, coupled with the feeling of inadequacy or lack of self-worth, leads to tolerance. Right. And so we see this in so many regards, especially in romantic relationships where there could be abuse, hopefully not physically, but it happens, but certainly physical, emotional, and psychological. The woman's capacity to deal with then becomes dysfunctional. It's maladaptive, right? Just because you are strong doesn't mean you should tolerate the abuse of whatever it is. It could be in the workplace too. So it's something that I'm a stand for women is just because you're resilient and you can put up with shit doesn't mean you should. And if you are, chances are you're looking through the lens of your own sense of inadequacy. Once you mitigate that and dissolve it, then you maintain your resilience, but you use it for things you're actually passionate about.
Thank you. That was perfect.
You're welcome. Next question.
Tell us about your freedom community.
Oh, I love my freedom community. It's something that I'm so quietly proud of. Maybe not so quietly because I just said it out loud. Did I say that out loud? I did. I hope I didn't say that.
Yeah, loud and proud.
I hope I didn't say that out loud just now. My God, Vanessa, you... No, anyway. Awesome. I bet she shags like a minx. That's not in the freedom community, by the way. But
No,
maybe we should add that.
I think that should be on your website.
Yes.
Business card.
Yes, Austin Powers. Although that was the description by the Financial Times journalist. She said, meeting Peter Crone is like meeting Buddha, Einstein, and Austin Powers all at the same time.
I did read that on your website.
Right, that's like that's split personality, but I kind of like all of them, so I'm okay with it. Anyway, to the freedom community, yes. So I had all of these a la carte courses on anxiety, depression, health, relationships, my Free Your Mind sort of flagship program, and people were buying them here and there, and then we realized, well, if we put it all in one place, make it super affordable, and then you can access everything at your own pace, as you wish, as you need. And so I do monthly Q&As. I put all my live events in there now, my monthly lives that I'm doing, so people don't have to have FOMO, although people are flying from all around the world to attend, which is really flattering. Yeah, so that's all in there. Over 80, 90 hours of content now at the low, very affordable price of $29 a month. So, yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. It's really nice to see it grow. And then there's a community component in there where you can interact, and there's a feed where people can share, and it's really beautiful. All of this kind of stuff that they witness here is in there. Like my Free Your Mind program, I work with 4 people. So you see this happen. In my live events, I'm working with people in the crowd. So you see that happen in there. It's all of this transcending the constraints with which we arrived that I spoke to earlier. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called freedom, helping people find freedom in all areas of their life. And then there's also just the practical things, like there's my financial freedom retreat, right? Like, why do people struggle with money? How to not do that. So, and then Ayurveda as well. So practical ways of living with diet and lifestyle. So it's not just all mental stuff. It's how to optimize every part of what it is to be human.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Casual Tuesday.
Yeah.
If you're into that kind of stuff.
If you're into being a free soul, check out Peter
who's
Crone.
loving life,
That's an
who's
automatic
abundant
yes.
and free and loving and full of possibilities. Or you can walk around miserable and, no, don't do that.
It's a choice.
One or the other. Relief from suffering.
Choice is an illusion.
Is it?
Oh.
No free
wait,
will.
we're not done. Wait, what?
What?
No free will.
What is that?
Well, free will occurs, right? So choice is figurative or literal. So people are making choices within the limits of their awareness. So you can only choose within that which you've already understood, right? You're really here. The choices have already been made. You're here to understand them, but you can only choose. Like, so if somebody is smoking cigarettes out in the world, they already know that with every piece of warning on a cigarette box or their friends telling them cigarettes are bad. Like, that's obviously very, very evident these days. But why are they still smoking? Well, because of the choices they don't understand yet, which is why they're doing it as a means of escape, which is, usually a vicious cycle, right? So they're doing something that they know they shouldn't or they don't want to. They feel guilt and shame. The guilt and shame energetically create the suffering from which they seek escape, and they use nicotine as the means to do that. So now they're in a cycle. But they don't know who they are that had them feel guilt and shame in the first place before they even started cigarette smoking. So that's the absence of choice. If it was a real choice, everybody would be living their life, abundantly and having amazing relationships. So choice is an interesting conversation. And that's where a lot of shame can come in, right? People say, well, you shouldn't do that. Or why did they do that? Like, this is assumption that we think everybody should know what's right and wrong. But no, people are doing the best they can with the awareness they have. And so that breeds more compassion.
Wow.
Yeah.
We should just have like a wow button, like that was easy button. Just wow. Every time it says something.
I know, it's like perfectly encapsulated too. I'm like, wow.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
You have to pick one of your own quotes to represent the life you've lived.
For myself?
From yourself.
From myself to myself?
Yeah, of course. What
Me,
else?
myself,
Who
and
else?
I. One of my quotes that most represents my life right now. I don't remember all of them, first of all. They tend to just arise as appropriate to the conversation. I do like that life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. I think I've embodied that to get to where I am.
Is there anything you would like to say to our female audience? Because the majority of it is female. And I just think with today's world, I know we touched upon it a little bit more, but if there's anything that would be helpful to them, that would expand on feminine energy in today's current world, how to utilize, harness it, whatever you feel.
I hope they can love themselves as much as I love them.
No.
Yeah. And again, I don't mean to say that poetically or to seem like that guy, but just if you really understand that my love is not dependent on who they are, but rather who I am. Right? So the sun doesn't choose to shine in a particular area of town because, they're nice houses and I'm going to ignore the other part of town because it's sketchy. The sun just shines, right? And so whatever they hear and what I just said, I hope they can understand that's true for them, right? Like most people, unbeknownst to themselves, because they don't have the real literal choice, they are being stingy in life. And if you really understood, as I think you two really hopefully represented in that conversation about your mum and the flames and the withdrawal, that your nature is love, I think both of you now step beyond being stingy with each other, not that you were doing that like intentionally, and go, holy shit, I have the capacity to be actually more loving because that is my nature. And so I would assert actually that whoever these beautiful female listeners you have, wherever they're not being loving, they're hurting themselves more than anybody else.
No. I just can't wait for you guys. So happy you got to hear that. Wow.
Yeah, and just to put the little disclaimer there, that doesn't mean, because this is a little, like seriously, this can be a sensitive subject, right? But there's a lot of women who are in relationships where they have over-accommodated, thinking, oh, if only I was more loving than my partner, my husband, my dad, because often it's the masculine, no knock on my brothers out there, but, that sometimes a woman will take on too much to try and compensate for what really is kind of an abusive situation. That's not the invitation. In that particular scenario, the woman being more loving for herself is going to be seen as withdrawing yourself from the situation, to remove yourself from an abusive situation, right? And I think that's a very slippery slope where women think it's incumbent upon them, as we spoke to earlier, the tolerance versus resilience. Oh, if only I was more loving, the potential that I see in this person would be, born. And that's not often the case. So the most loving thing often a woman can do is to remove herself from a situation that isn't loving.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then can you speak just to the concept of potential and like women? Because I think women have a tendency to see a potential in a man and then men will rise up, or what is that relationship from your...
It's really subtle. I mean, you can be a stand for someone's potential and it doesn't mean that it gets initiated or realized. And I think it's beautiful. I think we all to a certain degree rely on our friends, our loved ones, our family to be able to see the greater version of ourselves that is a calling for us to step into. I think there's a fine line. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? You can go to the gym and you have a certain degree of strength that you're have access to now, but you're going to just biologically create some hormetic stress to make the muscle grow so you're stronger next time or in 2 or 3 weeks. But if that weight that you're pushing is more than your current tolerance, then you can create an injury, right? So it's that, what is the sweet spot between speaking to someone's potential that they feel they can progressively step into versus saying something that doesn't resonate with their current version of themselves or their view of themselves, in which case it becomes deflection or denial where, you know, somebody thinks, well, you're just blowing smoke up my ass, that I can't do that, right? So it's a delicate balance, right? Like where we want to be committed to helping somebody see the greater iteration of themselves while still making it attainable. And so I think that only the individual can discern that, right? Some people, they really want to aspire to something that is so out of reach, and for somebody else, they really need baby steps, you know? So just being delicate to meeting someone where they're at. And sometimes if somebody, for example, is on a weight loss journey and their ideal weight is 140 pounds and right now they're 240, you know, it's like for them just taking a walk around the block twice is exactly where they need to start versus going to a HIIT or a CrossFit training, you know, and they get disappointed and give up, right? So it's meeting someone where they're at while simultaneously being a stand for what's possible for them.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Well, thank you, Peter Crone.
Thank you, Peter
Thank you,
Crone.
ladies.
Thank you. We
A pleasure
appreciate
to
you.
be with you both, and now a little bit closer to each other.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
illusion of separation got dismantled.
Yeah, we appreciate that a
Of
lot,
course.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really beautiful to witness that because I get how much you love each other, and so anything I can do to sort of remove the obstacles from that love is really fulfilling.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. I feel like this was a really special episode, especially for me and Allie. We're holding hands. My goodness.
I know.
I
Look at that
know.
physical
Look at that
affection.
physical
That's new. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks.